Hello, welcome. This is the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Jill, talking about the core 4 of treatment from my book, A Light in the Dark for Pandas and Pans. And I know that you're seeing this backwards, but I just wanted to give you familiarity to the cover so that you know what you're looking for. So the core 4 of treatment that I use are things that are addressing the causes, and so not only just the symptoms but also addressing the causes of pandas and pans. And I joke in my book that I could have done core 10, but also being a mom of pans kids, I know that core 10 would have been super overwhelming and you probably would have thrown the book into the wall and not picked it up again. So I was stuck to core 4, and each day this week I'm going through one of the cores. So today we're going to be talking about core 3. But first, let's talk about what are the core 4. So this is found in part 2, core 4, and I know this is backwards, but hopefully you can read backwards. Tame the flame, beat the bugs, regulate immunity, and guard the gates. So today we're talking about regulating immunity. So if you've missed the other videos, I'm just going to do a real quick, how did we get here with pandas and pans? The way we got here was a child whose immune system wasn't up for the challenge due to a combination of environmental influences, so environmental toxicants such as weed killer like Roundup, also known as glyphosate, such as mold and mold mycotoxins. This is my connection into this world, is not only because I'm a mom of pans, but because I work with a lot of mold patients. And mold is one of the most common triggers for creating pandas and pans autoimmune sequelae after having an infection. So you have immune depleted kid who's been faced with the challenge of toxins and then an infection. Then that trips the trigger for them to move into autoimmune disease. Autoimmune meaning their immune system is now attacking themselves. And in pandas and pans, that primarily is showing up, that attack is showing up in the basal ganglia of the brain. Why that matters is that the basal ganglia of the brain is what helps to regulate our dopamine, and dopamine is an excitatory brain chemistry. So when that's dysregulated, meaning that too much dopamine, too much glutamate, then the kid has the behaviors that we see that are consistent with pandas and pans. So that's going to be things like obsessions, compulsive behaviors, tics, anxiety, social anxiety, separation anxiety, and that can also affect other body systems. When we have this immune attack, that can be affecting the gut and the gut microbiome. And that's really important because our gut is what determines what we consider as self. So autoimmune means self-attack, and the immune system typically is supposed to be able to identify what is other, which is different than self-tissue, other meaning germs, like things that are from not self. So our immune system is supposed to recognize bacteria, parasites, viruses, and say, okay, that's other. We're going to go clear that out and either munch it or envelop it and, fight it, get rid of it. If our gut microbiome is messed up, the gut microbiome is what determines what is self, which is really wild to be thinking about. We have more microbes and more DNA in our gut than we actually have that belong to our own cells. So I joke that we're more microbe than man. More cell count, more immune DNA that is belonging to the probiotics in our gut than our own cells. So now you can see that the gut microbiome is very, very critical to why this became an autoimmune disease. Why did the autoimmune disease go to the brain? There are a couple of reasons for that, which we're going to talk a lot about that tomorrow and guard the gates. Part of it has to do with the fact that some things can get a direct elevator ride right up into the brain, right through our nose. But the immune deficiency, the microbial dysregulation in the gut is what is the precursor to why this became an autoimmune problem. And that's why I have my 4 environmental bad guys. weed killer, mold, EMFs, and mercury, because they all impede the immune system and impede the gut. So core 3 being regulate immunity, what we're really trying to do is not just shut down the autoimmune response, we're trying to boost up the immune system. An autoimmune condition could be thought of as immune exhaustion. And I'm sure we can all relate if we've ever had times in our lives where you don't have enough time, you have a lot of stuff stacked, you're spinning a lot of plates, and you start to kind of lose discernment. You kind of lose, like, have you ever been so busy where you are so busy that you can't even remember what's the most important thing for you to be working on? And so you kind of work on the thing that's just like easier and your brain doesn't have to work very hard on. That may not be the most important thing to be working on. That's kind of like the immune system. It gets so depleted and so overwhelmed that it will then start to, like, oh, we have inflammation in an area. Let's just shoot up the whole area because I can't handle it right now. And I'm just going to it's just like taking a whole desk full of papers and just sliding it off and putting it in your wastebasket. Some of that you might have needed, but it looks cleaner. So that's kind of how this autoimmune situation could be thought of, is that it's lost immune discernment between self and other and what's a priority because it's exhausted. So I didn't say boost immunity. I didn't say shut down immunity in my book. I call it regulate immunity, because we do want to boost the nourishment, the care of our immune system so that it has the discernment of what is the most important thing to be working on. Is it bug fighting, or is it repairing, or is it both? And then it doesn't lose the discernment of what is self and what is other. So what's in regulate immunity? What's in this core 3? Let's go through it. It's 8 things. They're kind of detailed, so I want to make sure and get to all of them in our short time today. Number 1, immunity nutrients. And we'll go through each one individually. Number 2, butyrate. Number 3, probiotics. Probably if you heard the beginning, if you were able to hear the beginning, that's not a big surprise now. Number 4, peptides. Number 5, ultra low dose naltrexone. Number 6, oral immunoglobulins. And that's like antibodies. Think of those as antibodies. Number 7, exosomes. And number 8, IVIG. These are all of the tools that I pick and choose from, maybe using one, maybe using a combination, typically a combination of things, that help to regulate the immunity. Because if we do the core 1 of tame the flame, so we calm down the reactivity of the body, core 2, beat the bugs, so we're getting on top of the infection load. Now we've got to boost up that immunity so that the body isn't, it's not wasting its time getting more depleted by attacking itself. All right, so let's go back through them. Number 1, immunity nutrients. Immunity nutrients, number 1 is vitamin D. And we're seeing this as really, really important for COVID as well. There's great research on vitamin D in COVID, and there's great research on vitamin D in many, many immune issues. Also, vitamin A. Vitamin A doesn't get talked about. Ooh, I'm going to go back to vitamin D. Mold mycotoxins block our ability to take in vitamin D. Mold is so wily. So if we have a low immune system, mold can move in easier, right? So a lot of people that I work with mold toxicity have a majorly low vitamin D. They can take all the supplements and it doesn't seem to be coming up. And that's because mold is doing this blockade of receiving it. There are a couple things that make a difference there. Is do a big enough dose for starters. So like an adult, I would do 5,000 IUs a day minimum to try to get their vitamin D level up to what we want. And you can dose adjust that for the weight of your child. In my book, I have something called Clark's Rule formula that gives you a formula how to adjust things for your child's weight. So vitamin D, also, if you have gummed up absorption of fat-soluble nutrients because you're gummed up with mold mycotoxins, you won't be able to absorb your everyday average vitamin D. I have found that liposomal vitamin D has been critical for getting numbers up, and then we don't need to use as big of a dose. If you're using regular old vitamin D, people are having to take 20,000 IUs to get what we can do with a liposomal in 5,000 IUs. So it's almost like 4 times as more effective at absorbing if you have mold in your story. Somebody did ask about, I want to make sure I address questions too, that I can do on the fly. Oh shoot, I saw a question about mold. Mold is a big one. 5 children showing signs of PANS. Oh, dang it. Yeah, mold is a big bugger. Mold a trigger for us too. Yeah, so know that about mold. It can block the receptor sites for vitamin D. So I check all of my patients who are affected by mold, PANDAS, PANS, like pretty much everybody gets a vitamin D check. And I control that number. I give them enough vitamin D to get between 60 and 90 nanograms per deciliter. Nanograms per dec. I think it's dec, not mil. Can't remember off the top of my head. And if you're in Canada or Europe, that's a different, you have to do that conversion. What brand of liposomal D? I really like Alight Health, that whole company, and full disclosure, I am medical director for them. We're working to make mold specific, mold absorptive products. So of course it's my favorite because we've been able to formulate it to combat that blockade. So that's what my favorite, just because I have a hand in making sure it's getting in. Mold has changed my kids' personality. Yeah, it causes a lot of brain inflammation. And then it, because mycotoxins can ride the elevator up to the brain, it causes localized neuroinflammation, but it also can change brain chemistry. So it really sets the stage for it to become PANDAS and PANS because because of the immune depletion, it can trigger into autoimmune. Okay, did I say everything about D? Okay, vitamin A. Vitamin A doesn't get talked about enough in the viral immune world, in my opinion. Unless you're working with like an autism specialist doctor, they're paying attention to vitamin A. I see vitamin A low in a lot of mold affected, weed killer affected patients. And vitamin A is like, our family calls it our get out of jail free card for when we start to get that little, like, ooh, I think I might be getting sick, that little sore throat that starts up, or that prickly feeling in your throat. We nail the vitamin A. And I give doses in my book of like, what do you do for 2 to 3 days when your child is kind of showing the signs that they might be getting sick, which is usually like a whinier child. Let's just be sleepier, whinier, lazier than they normally would be. And maybe they have a sore throat, but it's usually if you can catch it in that first little bit with that higher dose of the immunity nutrients, you can stop an infection. And I was really bummed that we weren't able to talk about a lot of this immune stuff when COVID first came out, because vitamin D and vitamin A, those two were saving a lot of my patients. And zinc, good old zinc ionophores. So, all right, so immunity nutrients, I just want to make sure that I'm giving you doses. So typical adult doses of what I call, this is my joke. Oh, awesome. High dose vitamin A was a lifesaver when my kids were little. Awesome. Yep. Now, vitamin A you want to be careful of because we do accumulate it, just like vitamin D. I watch labs to make sure that we're not going so high that we could be hurting someone's liver. That's the liver problem. Or the problem with too much vitamin A is it's toxic to the liver. Alight Health, how do I spell it? It's liposomal D plus K, and Alight, ALIGHT. And you can read about why I use that in the store part of my website. All right, so immunity nutrients, vitamin A, vitamin D, and something I jokingly call seasoned chicken. I work with really overwhelmed parents, and I have been that myself. You don't get sleep. You have a kid who maybe has been awake for 3 days, and you're standing there at the health food store going, what were the other ones that she said that we should get? So I created this moniker, it's seasoned chicken, to tell you what the nutrients are. So if you spell it out, SE is selenium, A of seasoned is vitamin A, Z is zinc, and then we've got D, so seasoned chicken, CK, vitamin C, vitamin K. Huge immune nutrients, that if we can do this at the first niggling of like, oh, I think someone's sick, because these kids with PANDAS and PANS, once it has tripped into an autoimmune trigger, they're very, very susceptible to having flares from even tiny, tiny little infections, regular cold, that kind of thing. Even though flu might have been the thing that set off the PANS, or a strep infection might have been the thing that set off the PANDAS, even just a little sore throat, a little adenovirus, a little normal cold can really flare the kids. So if you can stop it by nourishing the immune system to stop the infection on where it starts, then we don't have to get into flare. So I just want to give you doses. What I would use, so doses for, say, for 2 to 3 days of the seasoned chicken. It's so goofy, but, and then dose adjust this for your child using Clark's rule. So a typical adult dose would be 200 micrograms of selenium twice daily, 800 IUs of vitamin E, vitamin A, 50,000 IUs we do for 2 to 3 days at the first sign of a cold, and then not that high. That's an adult dose. Zinc, I would use 30 milligrams twice daily with food. Zinc can make you really nauseous if you don't have food. So with a good full tummy. Vitamin D, 50,000 IUs for those 2 to 3 days, adult dose. Vitamin C, 2,000 milligrams every 2 hours, up to 10,000 milligrams. Sometimes we go a lot higher than that, or until you get like a stool flush. And then vitamin K, 400 micrograms. So there's my seasoned chicken. That's how we do immunity nutrients. Lower doses then for maintenance. And I don't believe that everyone has to take all these every day. You know, some of the kids are going to be more immune deficient than others and might need it. All right, so if you're feeling panicked, this is going to be recorded. So you can just go back to my page and write all this down if you happen to be driving or making food or something like that. All right, let me do some questions. I love to see all the vitamin A. Yay! Sounds like liver would feed 3 birds. I'm going to change that. Feed 3 birds with 1 stone there. Yes. I'm a huge fan of clean liver as food. Liver and onions. I do not accept patients. I am not opening up my practice again. The only way to work with me would be as in a group setting in my membership or with the PANDAS PANS Parents Book Club. I'm on a mission to train more doctors. So that's where I'm dedicating my time. I'm sorry. I know that's not what anyone wants to hear. What mold tests for our children and our homes? Huge question. I'm going to do a whole series on mold mycotoxins, mold and mycotoxins. I'm going to do one of these just like this for that. But I do have some recommendations in my book on mold called Break the Mold. You can see the cover of it right back there. Break the Mold. I talk about both. A lot of mold testers are not paying attention to mycotoxins, which drives me crazy. Accounts you can go to that are paying attention to this is at Mold Finders on Instagram and at the Michael Rubino. Those are great. One is an inspector, one's a remediator, and they're great resources. Do I consult with families? The only consultation I do is with practitioners on behalf of their patients, and they have had to have taken my mold course because mold is so commonly the trigger. Yeah. Okay, you are driving, so you're glad it's recorded. Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, name of my book, I've got 2. One is called Break the Mold, and that's the mold book. And this one is called A Light in the Dark for Pandas and Pans. Okay, let's get back to immunity nutrients. So we talked about immunity nutrients. Second is butyrate. Butyrate is the favorite food of your gut lining. So it's like giving the gut lining its most, like a smorgasbord of its favorite amino acid. This is called short chain fatty acid, and it is so phenomenal for restoring the wall of our gut so that it supports a healthier microbiome. So what we've seen is that by using butyrate in a supplement, which tastes, if you don't have a kid who can swallow pills, it tastes like dirty socks, rotten eggs, all the farts, all the things. So I have parents, they will mix it into ranch dressing. And if your child is dairy free, you can use coconut-based ranch dressing. It works perfectly fine. But it is so amazing. All of us feel this way, right? If we have a stronger foundation and more support, we're happier. And that's the same as our gut microbes. If we have a strong, well-nourished, fed gut wall, the microbes are happier. The other thing that's really amazing for pandas and pans specifically is if we have a strong, nourished gut wall, we have a strong brain barrier, and that protects our kids' brains from systemic inflammation. Okay, number 3, probiotics. Which probiotic is always the big question, and it's becoming like a designer thing, you know, that you want to use this specific strain for this specific thing. Yes, that's all very important. However, if we use probiotics that balance the milieu, we could say, of the gut, like spore-based probiotics, then the body can put in the one that it wants. So do I use the designer ones? Yes, absolutely, for certain cases. But typically with pandas and pans, I'm starting with a teensy tiny bit of spore-based probiotic because they do cause a die-off. And then little by little by little by little, you add a little bit until they're on like a typical dose. Then if you need the other, you may, with the spore-based probiotic, be able to take away the other designer probiotics. And what I mean by designer is like there's certain strains that are good for mold, there's certain strains that are good for weed killer. So yeah, this is being recorded, so don't worry. Is butyrate good to take on an empty stomach? I have found that it doesn't really matter. Probably in an ideal world, yes, but you're also trying to get this into a kid who's maybe picky and not able to swallow pills, and so you're going to need to do it in something that they might be able to eat it with. You want to make sure if you're mixing it into something, it is it's less stable and hot, so you want to put it in something cold, and that's why we go with ranch dressing. Okay, so probiotics, that's number 3. Number 4, peptides. Peptides are tinier than amino acids, and they are how would we say this? Messengers. They can act like a messenger to cells, and a really, really good immune booster. So I like to use something called BPC 157 and TB4 Frag for pandas and pans kids, and you can get that from Integrative Peptides. Soon to be on my website as well, if that makes it easier for you, but Integrative Peptides is usually where I'm sending people. Each of them, so BPC 157 is like a gut-specific amino acid or peptide that the gut likes to eat. So again, it's kind of works like a butyrate does and kind of like the probiotic. And then the TB4 Frag is basically a component of thymosin, which thymosin is one of our glandular immune foods. And we're just taking the specific fragment that is looking for the benefit that we're looking for with pandas and pans. It's explained much better in my book when I could sit down and make it. So I don't know if you guys noticed that up to this point, they're all gut. They're all helping the gut. So gut is a super, super important way to get out of this brain problem, is to fix the gut. All right, number 5, ultra low dose naltrexone. This is a prescription. Has to be done by a compounding pharmacy. This isn't a regular pharmacy thing, so this is usually out of pocket. Your doctor will need to prescribe it. My big caution with this is doctors who try to get on the low dose naltrexone train start too high with these kids. These kids are very, very sensitive to medications. They have leaky brains. So a lot of our psych meds are actually designed to, for a short period of time after you swallow that pill, open up the blood-brain barrier so the medication can get up there. These kids have leaky brains all the time. And so if you have something like that that is affecting the brain and the brain function, you want to use ultra, ultra low doses. So typically with like my normal pandas pans patient, I would use like a 0.1 milligram to start. All right, so ultra low dose naltrexone. Number 6, oral immunoglobulins. Here's another one going back to the gut. We make the majority of our antibodies in our immune system is made in our gut. So if we give the oral, so if we have them swallow it, we can have them swallowing immunoglobulins, not necessarily to bring up their blood numbers, but to give the gut a sense of backup. So it's working a lot like the butyrate is working. Okay, we're getting short on time, so okay. Oral immunoglobulins such as, typically we're talking about things like colostrum. Like I love Sovereign Labs liposomal colostrum. But some kids can't do dairy. And so if that's the case, we can use the non-dairy form, like SBI Protect is one product. All right, exosomes, number 7. Depending on where we are in the legal, you may or may not be able to actually get access to this. So it's really frustrating to people that I put this in my book, but I have high hopes that we're going to be able to use this in every state. And I have seen these exosomes are the, think of it as stem cell juice. It's whatever was, if we soaked a bunch of stem cells, which are our repair cells, our anti-aging, our repair, our immune cells, if we soaked those and made stem cell juice, they have exosomes. These are little cell messengers, and those can be used IV to help the body know that, kind of trigger what a stem cell would trigger, the healing that a stem cell would heal. All right, 8th one is IVIG. I promised I'd talk about this today and I left it down to only 2 minutes. The big thing that you want to know for PANDAS and PANS is even if a child has low immunoglobulins, it's called hypogammaglobulinemia, which is, by the way, the diagnosis that you can get it paid for insurance. Even if a kid has that, we're not giving the dose to support their immunoglobulins. We're giving them a very high dose to stop the bone marrow from making antibodies against itself. I have seen over and over where people are giving the wrong dose of IVIG and are causing kids to go into mania, flare. It's the wrong dose. You need to use 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight of the child to hit the suppressive dose. Anything less than that is only boosting the immune system to make more antibodies to itself. Okay? How do you get it covered by insurance? Don't have your doctor not mention PANDAS or PANS in the chart, unless you're in one of the few states, 5 states in our country, which I can't pull up right now off the top of my head. I think Maryland is one, that do mandate insurance coverage for PANDAS, not necessarily PANS. So diagnosis matters and what's in the chart matters. Don't mention it in the chart. We're going to be treating hypogammaglobulinemia. We're going to be treating autoimmune encephalitis. We're going to be treating something that the insurance hopefully will cover, because IVIG is expensive. I have very rarely seen in a non-classic PANDAS case where one treatment did it. So when you're in the IVIG world, and not every kid with PANDAS PANS needs IVIG. I put it in there as all of these 8 things that I put in the book are in order of things where if that first thing worked, you don't have to go to the rest of the tools. If you go to number 1 and number 2 and that worked, don't go to the rest of the tools. So IVIG is not required in every case, but if it is required, very rarely is it a one and done. So you want to make sure that your doctor is really setting you up for success. And in my book, I go through like what they need to be doing blood work wise to make sure that we have more success for coverage. All right, I want to do a couple of these questions. I'm sorry if I missed. Ideal dose of LDN for a toxic adult. I don't go any higher than 0.25 milligrams with very sick toxic adults. Mast cell compounded drugs. Yes, we talked about mast cells in day 1, Tame the Flame. And then that's a mold question about exposure. You can email me with that question. Is yeast dysbiosis in the book? It's in the mold book. We do cover it a little bit in the PANDAS PANS book because yeast is a big deal for these kids. All right, guys, that's it for today. Tomorrow we'll be talking about guard the gates. I'm really excited to share this. This is Core 4. And then join me Friday. We're going to be talking about how to put it all together. Some of the supplement cautions that I would have, some herbs that can actually make things worse. Well-meaning that as we could be giving it to you and make your child worse. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. And I'll do more of a Q&A on Friday. So if you do have burning questions, then Friday will be mostly Q&A. and we'll talk to you then. All right, bye. Mwah.